The market was loud, filled with the cries of sellers and buyers. Strange cages stood on both sides, each cage holding a creature waiting to be sold. Some were small, some were strong, some were dangerous. But in one cage stood something different. It was her, the alien giantess. She was taller than 3 men standing on each other's shoulders. Her skin was pale with a strange glow. Her hair fell heavy like silver ropes. Her eyes, large and deep, looked empty, but inside them was pain. She was a prisoner, yet her presence made people step back in fear. The sellers laughed at her, their voices sharp like knives. "Too big to breed," one shouted, pointing at her. "She cannot give offspring. She cannot make money. She is useless." Another added with a cruel smile, "Mark her for slaughter. Her meat will sell better than her body." The crowd laughed, their voices echoing across the market, but the giantess stood silent. She did not cry. She did not scream. She only lowered her head. Her silence spoke louder than words. It was the silence of someone who had lost hope. Children in the crowd hid behind their parents. Some whispered, "She looks scary," while others stared with wide eyes. But none of them could see her pain. None of them could hear her broken heart. To them, she was not a living being. She was a product, a thing to be sold. Chains were heavy on her wrists and ankles. They made a sound with every small movement, a cruel reminder that she had no freedom. Her cage smelled of blood and fear, the smell of others who had been sold before her. She remembered the past, her mind filled with images. Once she had walked free on her homeworld, under skies full of purple stars. Once she had sung with her people, her voice shaking the mountains. Now all of that was gone, stolen by hunters who had chained her like an animal. The auction master stood tall, his voice booming. "Here she is, the giantess, too big for use, too strong for safety, but full of meat, full of profit." He hit the wooden hammer against the stand, the sound loud and final. "Who will take her? Who will buy this beast before she eats more food than she is worth?" The people laughed again, but none raised a hand. The sellers grew impatient. They whispered angrily, "No one wants her. She is too big, too dangerous. Sell her to the butchers." The word butcher hit the air like a blade. The giantess heard it. Her heart sank. She knew what it meant. Her life was ending soon. For a moment, her mind escaped into memories. She saw her mother's face, kind and gentle. She heard her father's voice, proud and strong. She saw her people dancing around fires, singing songs of freedom. And then she returned to reality, the cage, the chains, the laughter, the cruelty. The crowd pushed closer, the smell of greed heavy in the air. The auction master shouted again, "Slaughter her, sell her flesh. No use keeping her alive." The words echoed in her ears and her body trembled, not from fear of death but from the pain of being treated as nothing. She had lived, she had loved, but to them she was only meat. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. She refused to give the crowd the satisfaction of seeing her break. She looked up, her eyes shining with silent strength, and for the first time, a few in the crowd stepped back, because in that look, they saw something different. Not a beast, not an animal, but a soul. The silence of the moment was broken by harsh laughter. "Look at her eyes, she still thinks she is worth something," shouted one man. Another threw a stone at her cage, hitting the bars. The giantess did not move. Her face remained calm. But inside, her heart was screaming, begging. "Is there no one who can see me? Is there no one who can save me?" The auction master raised his hammer again. "This is the last call. No buyer for work, no buyer for family. Then to the slaughter she goes." The crowd cheered. Some clapped their hands. The giantess closed her eyes. Her story was ending before it could even begin. But in that final moment, as the hammer lifted high, a sound cut through the noise of the market, a single voice, calm yet strong. "I will take her." The crowd froze. The laughter stopped. Every head turned to see the one who had spoken, and in the middle of the market stood a human man, his eyes fixed on the giantess, not with fear, not with greed, but with something else, something the giantess had not seen in years. Pity, perhaps even hope. And in that moment, The story of the alien giantess took its first unexpected turn. The giantess sat in silence as the human man claimed her. The crowd was shocked, their mouths open in disbelief. Some laughed louder than before, others whispered to each other. "What a fool," one said. "He is wasting his money on meat." Another added, "Maybe he wants a pet that can crush him with one step." But the man did not answer them. He paid the price, heavy gold that made the auction master smile. The cage opened with a rusty sound, and the giantess stepped out slowly, her chains dragged across the ground heavy and cruel. She looked at the man, her eyes full of doubt. She wondered, why? Why would he claim me when no one else did? The man gave her no answer, only a nod. He walked in front and the giantess followed. The crowd's laughter followed them like shadows. The market grew smaller behind them, but the pain inside her heart grew bigger. She remembered the chains, being put on her for the first time, how the hunters had stormed into her village, how they had trapped her people, selling them one by one. She was the biggest, the tallest, and they had feared her strength, so they bound her tighter than the others. They whispered, "Too big to control, too big to breed, better to sell her cheap." Those words cut her deeper than the chains ever did. The giantess had once dreamed of being a mother. Her kind carried children close to their hearts. But when the hunters inspected her, they laughed. They said she was too big, her body not useful. And in that moment they took away not only her freedom but her future. She walked with heavy steps beside the man. The world around her blurred. She did not notice the roads or the people staring. Her mind was trapped. In memories, she remembered the songs of her people, songs of hope and love. Now her throat was dry. No song would ever come out again. At night, when they stopped to rest, the man gave her water and bread. She looked at it without touching it. At first, was this kindness or another cruel trick? Her heart could not believe in mercy anymore. Yet hunger pushed her to take a bite. It was dry, tasteless, but it reminded her of something. Her mother's hands giving her food long ago, her father smiling as she ate. She turned away quickly, hiding the tears that filled her eyes. The man made a small fire and sat nearby. He did not speak much, his eyes calm. But he watched her, not with fear, not with hate, but with curiosity. The giantess felt strange under his gaze. No one had looked at her this way since the day she was captured. Everyone else had only seen her as an object, a thing. But this man looked as if he was trying to see her soul. Still, pain was stronger than hope inside her heart. Every night in her cage, she had told herself the same truth. "No one will save me, no one will care for me, I am worthless." Those words had become part of her. Even now, with this man freeing her from slaughter, she did not believe in change. When she closed her eyes, she saw faces. The faces of her people taken away in chains, her friends, her family, her home burning. She heard the screams again, the sound of whips, the shouts of hunters. Her body shook as memories became too strong. She hugged her knees, even though her chains cut her skin. Her giant body looked smaller in that moment, like a child trying to hide from the world. The man noticed her pain but said nothing. He placed a blanket near her, though it was far too small for her size. It was not enough to cover her, but it was enough to remind her that he cared. She touched the fabric with her fingertips. For the first time in years, she felt something soft, something that was not chain, not cage, not whip. And though her eyes filled with tears again, she kept quiet. The night grew colder. The fire burned low. The giantess lay down, the earth hard beneath her. Her chains clinked with every breath. But she listened to the sound of the man's calm breathing nearby. It was steady, strong, and strangely comforting. She wondered again, why? Why did he take me? Why am I still alive? Sleep came slowly, broken by nightmares. She dreamed of slaughter, of knives, of laughter echoing in her ears. But every time she woke in fear, her eyes saw the small fire, and the man sitting nearby keeping watch. She did not know him, she did not trust him. But his presence was enough to hold back the darkness a little. The silent pain of her heart remained. It wrapped around her like the chains on her body. It whispered to her that she was nothing, that her story was already over. But a small voice inside, weaker than a whisper, began to ask, "What if he is different? What if he truly sees me?" The giantess turned her face to the stars. They reminded her of home, of skies that once belonged to her people. A single tear slid down her cheek, shining in the firelight. Her silent pain filled the night. But in that silence, something new was born. A fragile spark of hope, too small to name, yet too strong to die. The journey back to the city was long, but the giantess could not rest. Even though the man had bought her, even though she had escaped the butchers for now, she felt no peace. Her chains still clinked with every step, heavy and cold. They reminded her that she was not free, she was only transferred from one hand to another. When they arrived, the city's heart was beating with noise and chaos. Tall stone towers reached for the sky, and crowded streets were filled with people. Merchants shouted about their goods. Children ran between carts. Guards walked with spears. But when the people saw her, taller than rooftops, bound in chains, the city froze. Whispers rose like smoke. "Look at her size. She is dangerous. She is not human." The man led her through the crowd, but the whispers followed. Some eyes were filled with fear, others with greed. And soon the news spread faster than fire. "The giantess is here, and she will be sold again." The next morning, a new auction was arranged. The city lords had heard of her, and they wanted to see for themselves. The man who had claimed her before was forced to bring her to the grand market, he argued, but his voice was weaker than their power. "You cannot keep such a creature," they told him. "She is a danger to everyone." And so the giantess, once again, was placed inside a cage. This cage was bigger, made of steel bars thicker than a man's arm. The crowd gathered, larger than before. They came from far villages, towns, even distant lands. Everyone wanted to see the beast that had been spared from slaughter. The auction ground became a sea of faces. The air was heavy with heat, greed, and fear. The giantess stood tall inside the cage, but her eyes remained downcast. Her silence was her shield, though her heart was trembling. She could hear the cruel voices of the sellers as they shouted, "This is the giantess, too big to breed, too useless for work, but powerful flesh, strong bones." They praised her size, then mocked it in the same breath. Their words cut into her, reminding her of every insult, every humiliation. The auction master raised his hammer, his voice booming across the crowd. "Who will take her? Who will claim the beast? Who will dare?" But no hand rose. The people murmured among themselves. Some said she was too dangerous. Others said she was cursed. Still, no one wanted her. Fear grew in her chest as the silence stretched. She knew what silence meant. It meant slaughter. The same cruel words would return. "Sell her for meat." Her heart pounded louder than the voices. She thought of knives, of butcher tables, of her flesh being cut and sold. Her body shook, though she tried to stand strong. The crowd began to shout, "Slaughter her, slaughter her." The words spread like fire. "Slaughter her, she is no use." The chant filled the air, cruel and heavy. The giantess closed her eyes. Her chains rattled as she gripped the bars of her cage. Her silent scream echoed inside her, a scream no one could hear. Then the auction master spoke again. "If no one will take her, then she will be sold for slaughter tonight." The hammer lifted, ready to strike. The crowd cheered. The children clapped. But in that moment, something unexpected happened. A man stepped forward, the same human who had claimed her before. His voice was calm but filled with strength. "I will claim her again," he said. The crowd turned on him with anger. "You are mad," they shouted. "She will destroy you. She is worthless," but he did not back down. The auction master sneered. "Do you not understand? She is useless, too big, too empty, too cursed." The man shook his head. "No, she is not cursed. She is alive, and she deserves to live." The crowd gasped, his words strange to their ears. Who would speak for a creature marked for slaughter? The giantess looked at him through the bars. Her heart trembled again, but not with fear this time. His voice was steady. His eyes were clear. For the first time since her capture, she felt seen, not as meat, not as a monster, but as a being. The auction master slammed the hammer down. "Fine, he spat. "She is yours, but remember, when she turns on you, it will be your blood." The crowd roared in anger and disbelief, but the man ignored them. He walked forward, unlocking the cage with his own hands. The chains still bound her, but the way he looked at her was different. The giantess stepped out slowly, the ground shaking beneath her feet. The crowd stepped back, their chants dying into silence, and in that silence the man whispered to her, words only she could hear, "You are not alone anymore." Her heart broke and healed at the same time. Tears filled her eyes, but they were not the same tears of pain. They were tears of something she had almost forgotten. Hope, the auction, of fear had ended, but a new story had begun. The crowd did not calm. Even after the man claimed the giantess for the second time, the market buzzed with anger and confusion. Whispers spread like wildfire through the sea of people. Why would a human waste gold on her? He must be a fool or maybe cursed himself. Some laughed, others shook their heads, but a few simply stared in silence, trying to understand. The giantess walked beside him, her chains dragging across the ground. Every step was heavy, and, though she was freed from the cage, she still felt like a prisoner. Her eyes lowered, her heart filled with doubt. Why would he keep saving her? Why did he stop her from being slaughtered? No one had ever raised their voice for her, no one had ever dared, and yet this man had spoken, calm and strong, against the entire crowd. The market emptied slowly, but the whispers followed them. "Watch him, he will regret this. She is not meant to live. Foolish man, foolish creature." The giantess heard every word, each one piercing her heart. She was used to insults, but now they burned even deeper, because the man had risked himself for her and she feared he would be punished for his kindness. As they left the city, guards approached him. Their armor gleamed, their spears sharp. "You cannot keep her," one guard said coldly. "She belongs to the council. She is marked for death." The man stood tall, his eyes steady. "I paid for her. She belongs to no one but herself now." The guards laughed bitterly. "Do not test the council, human. They will come for you." The warning hung in the air like a shadow. That night they rested again, far from the noise of the city. The man lit a fire, the glow soft against the darkness. The giantess sat across from him, her knees drawn close. Her chains clinked when she moved, a sound she hated but could not escape. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of flames. At last the man spoke, his voice calm. "I am not like them," he said. "I do not see you as meat or curse or monster." His words reached her, but she struggled to believe. Her lips trembled, though no words came. Her voice had been silent for so long, buried under pain and fear, but her eyes lifted, shining with a question. Why? Why me? The man seemed to understand her silence. He looked into the flames as he spoke again. "When I was a boy, I saw a creature like you, chained and beaten, just like you are now." His voice grew softer, touched with memory. "I could do nothing then. I was small, powerless. But I promised myself, if I ever had the chance, I would not stand by again." The giantess listened, her chest tightening. His story was simple, but it carried weight. It was the first time someone spoke to her not with cruelty, but with memory, with truth. She lowered, her gaze, her heart torn between fear and something she had almost forgotten. Trust. The fire flickered, throwing shadows across her face. In the silence, the man reached into his bag and pulled out a small piece of cloth. He dipped it into water and gently moved closer. The giantess stiffened, expecting harm, but instead, he touched her wrist, wiping the blood where the chains had cut her skin. The cloth turned red, his hands careful, gentle. Her breath caught, her body frozen. No one had touched her with kindness in years. The world felt different in that moment. Her chains were still heavy, her body still bound, but something inside her shifted. She looked at the man again, and though no words left her lips, her eyes asked the question once more. "Why save me?" The man smiled faintly, almost sad. "Because no one else will," he whispered. And then he leaned back, letting the fire's warmth fill the silence again. The giantess turned her face to the sky. The stars glimmered faintly, and for the first time in a long while, she felt their light touch her heart. Her silent pain was still there, but his words had planted a seed inside her. A seed of hope, fragile yet alive. The night passed, and morning came with new challenges. As they walked the road, villagers stared, pointing and whispering. Children clung to their mothers, men picked up stones, but the man stood firm, walking with her as if she were no monster. When someone spat at the ground, he ignored it. When someone cursed him for protecting her, he kept moving. The giantess saw all of this, her heart heavy but also strangely warm. She realized that his voice had changed everything. A single voice had stood against the crowd. A single voice had silenced the hammer of slaughter, and that voice now walked beside her, step after step, never leaving her side. At night, when the fire burned low again, she found herself watching him. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her voice was still trapped in the prison of fear, but deep inside something whispered, "Maybe, one day I will speak again." The unexpected voice had changed her fate. It had pulled her from the darkness of slaughter into the uncertain light of life. And though the world still hated her, mocked her, feared her, she now had something she had thought lost forever, a chance. The road was long, stretching through forests and empty fields. The giantess walked slowly, her chains dragging with every step. The human man stayed close, never rushing her, never showing fear. Yet inside her heart, doubt still lived, whispering that his kindness could not last. Days passed, and each day brought the same question inside her mind. Why does he protect me? She could not ask with words. Her voice still locked behind years of silence, but her eyes often turned to him, searching for an answer. Every time, she found him calm, steady, walking as if her presence was natural. At night, they rested by fires. The man shared his food with her, simple bread, dried meat, fresh water. She would take it slowly, almost shyly, her hands too large and rough for such small things. But he never mocked her, never looked at her as clumsy or strange. He watched her eat with quiet patience, as though feeding her was no burden. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, a storm rolled in. The wind howled, the rain fell heavy, and the fire they tried to build would not stay lit. The giantess wrapped her arms around her knees, shivering though her body was strong. Memories of cold cages and wet stone floors filled her mind. She hated storms, for they always reminded her of the night she cried alone in chains. The man noticed her trembling. He pulled off his own cloak and offered it to her. It was far too small to cover her giant frame, but still, he held it out with both hands. The giantess hesitated, staring at the cloth. Her heart screamed, "Why would he give me warmth when he has so little for himself?" She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the fabric. It was soft, warmer than she expected. Her chest ached, not from pain, but from something strange, something unfamiliar. Gratitude. That night, though the storm raged, she slept with the cloak clutched close. For the first time in years, she felt the comfort of being cared for. Her dreams were still filled with chains, but this time, there was also a voice whispering, "You are not alone anymore." As the days turned to weeks, small changes began. The giantess started to look at him differently. Her eyes, once heavy with despair, now held glimmers of light. When he spoke, she listened. When he laughed softly at small things, she found herself watching his face. And when he offered kindness, she no longer pulled away. One afternoon, as they crossed a river, her chains caught on a rock. She stumbled, nearly falling into the rushing water. Panic filled her chest, the same panic she had felt in cages, the panic of helplessness. But before fear swallowed her, the man was already at her side. He held the chain, pulling it free, his hands bleeding against the sharp edges. She froze, staring at his wounds. Blood dripped into the water, red against the rushing current. He winced but said nothing. His only concern was freeing her. The giantess felt her chest tighten, her throat burning. She wanted to speak, to say something, but no words would come. Instead, she reached down, her massive hand trembling. With the gentlest touch, she lifted his hand from the chain. Her eyes met his, full of silent meaning. "Why do you hurt yourself for me? Why do you care?" He smiled faintly, though his hand bled. "Because you are worth saving," he said softly. Her heart pounded at those words. Worth saving. No one had ever said that to her before. For years she had been told she was worthless, too big, too useless, only good for slaughter. And now here was a man who spoke the opposite. Her tears fell unstoppable. But this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of release, of a pain slowly breaking apart. That night, as they sat by the fire, something changed. The giantess picked up a piece of bread and held it out to him. Her hand shook, unsure, afraid he would laugh. But he did not laugh. He took it with a grateful smile. It was the first time she had ever shared anything since her capture. The first time she had given instead of only receiving. And in that moment a bond began to form, fragile but real. The man spoke gently, telling her stories of his childhood, how he had grown up in a small village, poor but free, how he had lost his family to sickness yet still held on to hope. The giantess listened, her heart aching for his pain. For the first time she realized that he too carried scars. Not on his skin, but inside his soul. The bond between them grew quietly, built on simple acts. A cloak shared in the storm, a chain lifted from the river, a piece of bread passed across the fire. They were small things, but for her, they were everything. They were proof that she was no longer just a beast, no longer just meat. She was seen, cared for, valued. Her silent pain had not vanished, but now it was softer, and inside her chest something new grew stronger with every passing day. Trust. She did not know if the world would allow it. She did not know if hunters, guards, or councils would take this fragile bond away. But as long as the man walked beside her, as long as his voice spoke against the darkness, she believed in something she had thought forever lost: the possibility of belonging. The bond between the man and the giantess grew stronger with each passing day. Yet the world around them was not blind. Whispers spread quickly across towns and villages. A human walking beside a giantess, chains still on her wrists, eyes full of sorrow but no longer empty. Some called it madness, others called it rebellion, and many called it a danger that could not be ignored. The first signs came in the form of stares. Whenever they entered a village, people paused their work, their conversations, their laughter. Eyes followed the giantess like shadows. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men reached for their tools as if preparing for a fight. The giantess lowered her head each time, her heart sinking. She felt like a curse upon him. If the world hates me, they will hate him too, she thought. One afternoon, as they walked through a small market, a group of merchants blocked their path, their faces twisted with anger and fear. "Leave this place," one shouted. "We do not welcome monsters here." The man stood calmly, his voice steady. "She is no monster. She means no harm." The merchant spat on the ground. "Do not lie, human. She will crush us all one day. Better to kill her now." The crowd grew louder, voices rising like thunder. Kill her," they shouted, their fear feeding their hatred. The giantess trembled, her hands curling into fists, not from anger, but from helplessness. She wanted to scream, to tell them she was not a beast, but her voice would not come. Her silence made their cruelty sharper. They saw silence as guilt, as proof she was soulless. The man stepped forward, shielding her with his body, though he was so small compared to her size. "If you strike her," he said, his voice cutting through the shouts, "you strike me too." The crowd gasped, shocked by his boldness, but their fear did not vanish. They backed away slowly, muttering curses, their eyes filled with hatred that promised trouble would return. That night, as they sat by the fire, the giantess kept her eyes on him. Her heart ached. "You stand in front of me," she thought. "You risk yourself, but what if they harm you because of me?" Tears slid down her cheeks silently. The man noticed and placed a hand gently on her chain. "I will not let them take you," he whispered. His voice was soft, but it carried strength. It was enough to calm the storm inside her for a while. Days later, a group of guards came, their armor shining, their faces hard. They carried the council's mark, the same council that had once ordered her death. "You were warned," one guard said coldly. "Return the Giantess or face punishment." The man stood tall, his hands steady. "She is not yours to take," he replied. "She is mine to protect, and her life is her own." The guards exchanged sharp looks, their hands tightening on their weapons. The Giantess felt her body shake, her heart pounding like thunder. Would blood be spilled for her again? But the guards did not fight that day. They only left a warning, their words heavy like iron. "The council will not forgive this. Prepare yourself." When they were gone, silence filled the road. The Giantess looked at the man with wide eyes. Her lips trembled as though her voice was trying to escape, but only air left her throat. No sound. Still, he understood her look. He nodded softly. "Yes, they will come, but I will still stand with you." As they traveled further, the hatred of people grew stronger. Villagers threw stones, children cried at the sight of her. One night their camp was attacked by hunters, men who wanted gold for her capture. Chains clanged in the darkness as they tried to bind her again. The Giantess froze, memories of her first capture flooding back. But the man fought, his blade flashing in the firelight, his body taking blows meant for her. He shouted her name, though she had never spoken it aloud. The sound of it gave her strength. For the first time she raised her hand in defense, not against him, but beside him. With a single strike she broke the chains the hunters carried, sending them fleeing into the night. When the battle ended, the man's body was bruised, blood on his skin. The Giantess knelt beside him, her eyes wide with fear. She touched his wounds gently, her hands trembling. For the first time she let out a sound, a low, broken whisper. It was not a word, but it was her voice, cracked and raw. The man looked at her, his eyes soft despite the pain. "You spoke," he whispered back, a faint smile on his lips. Her eyes filled with tears, heavy and unstoppable. Though she had not said words, the wall of silence had begun to break. The world was against them. Villagers, guards, hunters, councils. Everywhere they went, the hatred followed. But in the middle of that storm, something stronger grew. The bond of trust was no longer fragile. It had turned into something fierce. They were no longer just protector and prisoner. They were two souls standing together against the world as the fire burned low that night. The Giantess sat close to him. Her chains were still on. Her voice still weak, but her heart was different. For the first time in her life, she believed in something beyond pain. Not freedom yet, not peace yet, but the promise of both. And though the world hated her, she had one person who refused to let go. That was enough to keep her alive. The bond between the man and the Giantess had grown like a fragile flame, but the world would not allow it to burn peacefully. Whispers became orders, and orders became action. The council declared her dangerous, a curse upon the land. They sent hunters, soldiers, and spies, all with one goal: bring her back, dead or alive. The man knew the storm was coming. He felt it in the silence of the villages, in the cold stares of strangers. And the Giantess felt it too, her chains heavier than ever. Fear gnawed at her heart, but beside that fear lived something stronger, her trust in him. One night, the sound of horns broke the air. Dozens of torches lit the darkness, marching feet shook the ground. The council's men had come, they surrounded the camp, their voices loud. "Return the beast or face death," they shouted. The man stood in front of her, sword in hand, his body small but unshaken. "She is not a beast," he replied, his voice strong. "She is alive, and she is mine to protect." The soldiers laughed, their armor clinking as they stepped closer. "You cannot fight us all, human. Stand aside." But he did not move. Behind him, the Giantess trembled, memories of cages and slaughter filling her mind. Her chest rose and fell with panic, her lips trembling. She wanted to scream, to beg them to stop, but her voice remained trapped. Tears rolled down her cheeks as the man raised his sword alone against an army. The battle began, fast and brutal. Blades flashed, torches swung, arrows flew through the night. The man fought fiercely, his body moving with desperate courage. Every strike he made was not for himself, but for her. His blood stained the ground. His breath grew heavy, yet he did not falter. The giantess watched, her heart breaking with each wound he took. She gripped her chains, her body shaking. Something inside her was tearing open, something buried for years. And then it happened. Her voice broke free. "Stop!" she screamed, her cry echoing across the battlefield like thunder. The soldiers froze, their eyes wide in shock. Her voice was deep, powerful, filled with years of pain and fire. Even the man turned, his eyes full of awe. The giantess rose too, her full height towering above all. Her chains rattled as she stepped forward. Her tears shone in the torchlight, but her voice was no longer silent. "I am not a beast," she cried, her words shaking the air. "I want to live." The soldiers stumbled back, fear in their eyes. They had heard of monsters roaring, but never of a giantess speaking with the voice of a soul. Her words cut through their hatred, breaking the image they had painted of her. She was not meat, not curse, not beast. She was alive. The man, bleeding but standing, looked up at her with pride. "You found your voice," he whispered, his smile faint but full of warmth. The giantess turned to him, her heart aching with love, with gratitude. And then she faced the soldiers again. Her chains still bound her, but her spirit was free. With one powerful motion, she pulled, the iron, links snapping against her strength. The sound of chains breaking rang through the night. She stood unbound for the first time in years. The soldiers hesitated, fear flooding their ranks. Some dropped their weapons. Others stepped back. The sight of her free, her voice alive, was more terrifying than her silence had ever been, but she did not strike them. She raised her hands and spoke, her voice steady though her body trembled. "You call me a monster, but I bleed, I cry, I dream, just like you." Her words silenced the night. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers looked at each other, doubt flickering. In their eyes, they had been told she was soulless, a danger, a thing to kill. But now they saw her tears, heard her voice, felt her plea, and for the first time some lowered their swords. The council's commander shouted in rage, "Do not listen, strike her down." But fewer men obeyed. The bond between the man and the giantess had become a shield stronger than steel. And in that moment the army's hatred began to crack. The battle did not continue. The soldiers retreated slowly, dragging their torches into the darkness. The commander cursed, but even he knew the truth. Killing her would no longer be simple. The people had seen her voice, her tears, her soul. When the night grew quiet again, the giantess knelt beside the man. His body was weak, his wounds deep. Her massive hands trembled as she touched his face. For the first time, her voice was soft, gentle, full of emotion. "You saved me, and now I will save you." Tears flowed freely down her cheeks. She pressed her forehead against his small hand. The chains were gone, the silence broken. Her life had been given back, not by mercy of the world, but by the courage of one human. From that night on, she was no longer the silent giantess marked for slaughter. She was the giantess who had spoken, who had broken her chains, and beside her stood the man who had believed when no one else would. Together they walked into an uncertain future. The world was still against them, but they were no longer afraid because now they had something stronger than fear. They had each other.